Greetings gamers, nerds, and compañeros. I'm Black Cat Red River. This is a quick guide to healing in Ancestors, the Humankind Odyssey. This is not going to be an exhaustive or complete guide to all of the plants and food items with medicinal qualities that are found in the game. The focus here is going to be confined to the healing options immediately available to you as a new player inside the noob starting settlement or its immediate vicinity. There's 5 primary categories of injury or ailment in Ancestors that you're going to wish to understand and remedy at some point, all of which have mild and severe forms. Venom Poisoning, generic injuries caused by hostile animals or falls from great heights, bleeding wounds from a predator attack, food poisoning from eating spoiled fruit, meat, or drinking stagnant water, and digestive ailments caused by having non-omnivore traits. Given that large snakes are among the first dangerous creatures encountered in the game, venom poisoning is one of the earliest ailments you may find yourself needing to remedy. In this example, the hominid is prepared with 5 protective shields or buffs against various threats including venom, and the venom protection bar looks like it has about 2/3 remaining. Let's see how this protective shield fares against multiple snake bites. The first bite eliminated all the remaining protection but caused no actual poisoning. The second bite, however, resulted in severe venom poisoning. The immediate effect of the poisoning turns the entire screen hazy and blurry and makes it difficult not only to perceive potential threats, but also to see objects on the ground even, making it unwise to continue exploration or hunting before dealing with your situation. There are 3 main ways to deal with venom poisoning. The easiest and slowest is just drinking water and flushing your system until it goes away. Eating honey and drinking coconut milk and eating coconuts are better options, honey being of moderate effectiveness, requiring multiple dips into the honeycomb to fully eliminate all venom. Coconut is the most effective, but it does require a little bit of preparation. You need a tool, a rock of some kind, to open it in the first place and get the milk. And as you will see here, one coconut does not quite eliminate all of the venom in the system, so a second is needed here. Overall, waiting until you're poisoned to try to locate bees' nests or coconut trees and looking for the tools needed to access them while poisoned and your vision is blurred can be a bit of a challenge, so having a pre-made stockpile of antidotes at your settlement or at a hunting camp somewhere further away is a very good idea. Either way though, both honey and coconut are more effective as preventative shields than as post-snakebite cures, so taking that extra time can be worth the effort. And in fact, this is a good thing to keep in mind for all the medicines in the game. Prevention is usually better than a cure. When you see the fang symbol on a shield background near the bottom left of your screen, it means you're protected against venom poisoning. But it's on a timer represented by the small bar behind the shield icon. A single use of a coconut in advance of an injury will grant about half of a protective shield or buff against a future bite and will take some time to wear off. You can either top it up by consuming a second coconut or by eating some honey. Both are just as effective when used in advance, and in some ways, honey is easier than coconuts because the supply never really runs out. Another common injury is what the game classifies simply as injury, although this is somewhat confusing because clearly it refers to non-bleeding injuries, like a sprain or a broken bone. And the debuff symbol for this is the broken bone. White for moderate injuries and red for severe injuries. And these are typically caused in one of two ways. Falling from a very great height, or suffering damage from an animal, typically, though not exclusively, of a type that the game classifies as irascible. Irascible just means that it's an aggressive animal, often an herbivore, so it's not typically the kind of animal that will eat you. And in Ancestors, the first irascible animal you generally encounter is the giant warthog. Regardless of the cause, when you do suffer a generic injury of this kind, it usually results in a debuff movement penalty, and visually, it appears like your hominid has suffered a sprain or a broken bone. So you will be slower until your injury is fully healed up. There are two plants to look for that can speed up or finish your recovery from these kinds of injuries. The first of these is one of the most common plants in the game, called horsetail. And this edible green plant is found typically along the edges of ponds and rivers, including within your starter settlement. The second of the plant types to look for is the cat leaf, a distinct red or pink-colored leaf that grows on a small tree. These trees can be found throughout the land as well, and there are at least 3 of them immediately adjacent to or above the starter settlement. As with horsetail, cat leaves can be eaten raw to give a weak to moderate mitigation of generic injuries, as well as some protection against cold weather. But their true potential is unlocked when the leaves are ground into a concentrated paste and then ingested. This provides a full shield of protection against generic injuries and cold weather. But be careful where you stockpile cat paste, however, because your clanmates can eat them when you don't want them to, as they tend to mimic whatever it is that you eat. Bleeding wounds are typically caused by predator attacks and are the most life-threatening of the injuries in the game. If left untreated, they can lead to death, so if you don't notice when a clanmate has suffered such a wound and time passes, you may just receive a notification that one of your hominids has died. After any animal attack involving your clan, it is generally a good idea to analyze each of the clan members present to ensure they are not bleeding. There are numerous ways to cure bleeding wounds in the game. The first of these available to you inside your starting settlement is honey, but applied to the wound, not ingested. And this requires stripping the honey off your grass stem first, and then applying it as a salve. The second way to cure bleeding wounds involves horsetail again, but this time modified by stripping it into a small bundle of horsetail leaves. These can be applied to the wound instead of ingested to stop existing bleeding or to give a small shield against future bleeding wounds. The third way is to process the horsetail leaves even further by grinding them into a green paste. Like the cat paste, the horsetail paste requires a granite grinder tool in one hand to be able to craft it. It is not used to modify the raw horsetail, but only the already stripped horsetail leaves. A fourth way available at the beginning of the game is to use kapok fibers, which grow in the high canopy of the jungle's largest trees. The only drawback, really, to using kapok fibers is that they can be a little difficult to find and reach, and for the new player who may not have mastered jumping from tree branch to tree branch quite yet, the kapok fibers can sometimes pose a challenge. Collecting them in advance rather than looking for them when you're already bleeding is highly recommended. More rare at the start is mud itself, used as a salve and packed into the bleeding wound. But mud is not generally found at the starting settlement unless you're lucky enough to find it under one of the large liftable rocks. Mud has some additional properties on top of clotting, such as protection from extreme heat, and a camouflage that makes you harder to detect and harder to smell by both predators and prey. Any of these 5 methods will stop existing bleeding wounds, but the horsetail paste and the mud are the most effective in terms of providing advanced protection in the form of full shields or buffs against potential bleeding. Food poisoning and non-omnivore are the final 2 ailments, and they both relate to consumption of food items as well as stomach or digestive tract issues. They are, however, conceptually distinct in terms of both cause and remedy. Food poisoning is caused by eating things that are bad for you, like poisonous mushrooms, spoiled or rotten fruit or meat, or drinking stagnant or putrid swamp water. The best way to tell if fruit or meat is spoiled is to use the inspect button, even after you have discovered the food type in question. And the response of the hominid will indicate whether they think it smells good or bad. By far the easiest method to address food poisoning, especially early game, is just to drink fresh water until your system is flushed and the debuff goes away. Coconuts are also good for mitigating food poisoning, not just snake venom. Those are your 2 best methods early on, because other methods like mushrooms that can be used to cure food poisoning require acclimatization first. Not all mushrooms in the game are poisonous. Some of them have medicinal qualities, but all of them require the hominids to develop evolutionary traits first that allow them to safely assimilate fungus. The African agaric fungus, for example, is available inside your starter settlement. You should eat it because it will help the process of eventual assimilation, but when you do eat it, you'll notice 2 different icons appear. The first is the non-omnivore debuff, but the second is an actual protection against food poisoning. Similarly, the blue roundhead mushrooms, which can typically be found underneath the large liftable rocks, have curative properties with respect to food poisoning, but cannot be properly digested until your hominids have become omnivorous. Blue roundhead mushrooms can be ground into a blue mushroom paste that is even more effective at treating and protecting against food poisoning. But the true potential of this medicine can't be fully realized until your hominids are able to consume mushrooms freely. Until then, you will continue to get the non-omnivore debuff alongside the protective shield against food poisoning. So for this reason alone, the best options available for new players in the starting zone are fresh water and coconut. After becoming omnivorous, however, blue roundhead fungus paste is definitely your best option. There is no cure in the traditional sense of the term for a non-omnivore trait. The digestive ailment or debuff that this produces can be mitigated by drinking copious amounts of water, but beyond that there's no cure or protective shield other than eventual evolution into an omnivorous hominid. That's not really something to worry about early game, however, because it actually requires not just acquiring neuronal traits in the evolutionary trait tree shown here, but passing these traits on to future generations as well. And this requires an understanding of the differences between, the past generation and the evolve lineage mechanics of the game, both of which jump forward in time. But those are aspects of the game beyond the scope of this quick guide to healing. I've tried to confine myself to the options available to those just starting out on their journey, and why the distinction between food poisoning and non-omnivore debuffs matters. Overall, the 3 best items to stockpile at any settlement or forward hunting or exploration camp are horsetail paste for bleeding, cat paste for injuries and cold protection, and coconuts for venom protection. All 3 of these can be used as post-injury curatives, but all 3 are best reserved for protective shield buffs before you go out into the world. Picking up kapok fibers, honey, and mud is nice for supplementing your reserves, depending on what is abundant or scarce in your area. But horsetail, cat, and coconuts are the holy trinity of healing, and all really that's necessary to give you the protections you need early game. If you have a suggestion for a future quick guide, feel free to leave a comment below the video. Good luck out there in the jungle, hominids. Until next time. And don't forget to keep an ear open for saber-toothed growls, or you might not need any healing whatsoever.